Wonderful. Welcome to the show. Today we have Jonathan with us. Jonathan has a history in video game development, and he is currently working as an AR and VR product manager at Google. Jonathan, do you want to tell us a little bit about your journey on how you found AR, VR, and what led to wanting to do a product role in that domain? What was that? What was that like for you?
For sure. So, I mean, long story short, I started in the video game industry as an artist. I did that for about 12 years. If you know anything about the video game industry, it's not easy. It's a pretty rough place to be, especially if you're trying to have and maintain kind of some levity in your career and, you know, maybe stay at the same place for more than 2 years. That's going to be very difficult. So after being shut down several times, I just wanted to figure out for myself how I can find something where I have more control over the product, where I have more stability in my career, and something that would carry over that experience into a different role. So I went back to school and later jumped in at a startup that developed video game voice chat technology. So I joined there as a product manager. And, you know, about 25 people we started with. I think it grew to about 50. Really, the difference in just sheer scale, the smaller you get, the more responsibilities, the quicker you move, the more you learn. I think that's not just being a PM, but in any role at a startup. But that was still out in Boston, and I'm from the Bay Area. I came back home. I originally wasn't interested in Google because, you know, I'm a video game guy, and I wanted to continue working on games. So when someone kind of nudged me like, hey, Google has some game stuff, or Google has some stuff you'd be interested in, like they still do Daydream, so they have some VR stuff. I said, oh yeah, I guess they do. So that kind of pushed me towards Google about, I want to say a little over 2 years ago. And I've been in the AR org the whole time, previously called Daydream. So really, I think for me, it was about finding something that was even loosely tied to video games, where I had that huge knowledge and experience base. So I didn't really feel like I was losing a lot of that experience at all, because a lot of the development tools, a lot of the content creation tools that were used in video games are similar to what you would use in VR and AR. Because as you know, like that chief use case that they push for VR happens to be games anyway.
Right. You mentioned that thank you for sharing that. You mentioned that you went back to school. Did you study anything that was directly related to what you're doing now, or was that more of an exploration? What was that like? Tell us a little bit about what was that decision like? Like, how did you choose to go to school? Yeah.
It was a lot of exploration. So I went and did an MBA dual degree, where when I was in the MBA portion, it was really general. And I did about 3 different internships that one of them was a PM internship at Sony Music. But one was marketing at a bio ad firm. Another was a different type of marketing position at Autodesk. So I was a bit all over the place, just trying to explore and find out what did I like. Maybe I need to just use this opportunity as an intern to learn more, to figure out if direction of product management was what I actually wanted. So ultimately, I did land on product management because it was and is what I thought it would be.
Very interesting.
And to actually, sorry, I didn't actually answer your question, but the second portion of that degree was actually called Media Ventures. And there they had things we learned like rapid prototyping, you know, entertainment and tech law, just really interesting stuff that you wouldn't find interesting initially, but once you dig into it, it's like, oh, this stuff is really necessary if you want to build your own startup or if you want to work for a tech company. It's good to have that knowledge. So that really helped steer me in what I needed to learn to prepare for being a PM.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So one other thing you mentioned is how video game shaped a little bit of initial of your career journey. And it's interesting you say this because a lot of my friends are also in video game entrepreneurship, and it's very
Nice, nice.
challenging. It's a side hustle that they do it as a side hustle, but it's a very they find it very challenging. Can you tell why you think it's hard to find levity in that industry, and what is the transition to VR or AR like for people who are in that industry, people who are like you 5 or 7 years ago? What was the underlying reason for lack of levity in video game? Like,
Yeah, I mean, if I was going to sum it up, and I'll give more detail after this, but my summation is that video games have grown increasingly more popular, and that's what drives this. It's just made it more popular, more expensive to build. So where you think of when I grew up and there are Nintendo cartridges, um, you know, it took very little to actually make a Nintendo game, a smaller team, less resources. But now you think of something like Cyberpunk or Grand Theft Auto, you have teams of hundreds of people with marketing and legal departments creating the game for several platforms. It's just, if a studio puts 5 years and, you know, dozens of millions of dollars into a game that fails, that studio is getting shut down. So that happened to me several times. And after like the fifth time, that's when I decided I should probably go back to school and try to figure out how I can, you know, have more security in my career.
got it. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
I'm curious about what are, like, getting more into the PM stuff for AR and VR. What are some of the use cases around AR and VR that you're excited about right now? How does it translate for your standard product use cases? What does that look like?
Hmm. I think the most exciting thing is that no one has it figured out yet. I think that's extremely exciting because it just gives so much more room for creativity. Like we have several examples out in the world where you can see like, oh, this is cool. This is fun to use, but is it like that killer use case?
Mm,
I don't think we have that quite yet. VR is interesting in that way because we've used it several times for video games. You know, you have things like the Vive and Valve has made a headset, and you have those available, Oculus, and people primarily use them to play games. But it kind of goes back and forth to where now, I don't know if you saw like latest announcements, HTC made really lightweight sort of VR goggles that are like for wellness and entertainment. So they're really lightweight. You can travel with them and watch movies while you're on the plane. So that's interesting to see how people will use or accept that as like an actual product that makes sense to them. But AR is just more wide open. I like AR because, again, like there's just so much room to just think. You don't have any real boundaries or walls with it. Everybody I think has thoughts to what may be those use cases, but it's always changing. And
Mm.
that's what I enjoy about it.
Is it, let me ask you this, is it the fact that nobody has figured it out, is that lack of integration of the technology with real use cases or business value generated from it? Is that the lack of business value that it can create at this point in time, or is it lack of advancements in the technology itself? Or maybe it's a comment, I don't know, what is it? What do you think is the root cause of people not having figured out yet?
Yeah, it's a few things. I think that you really find product market fit when there are tons of people who use it and sort of in a way steer it in a particular direction. And I might think of the Apple Watch that way, where when they initially launched it, people like myself were like, what is this stupid thing? I don't want, this thing I'm now wearing. I don't want this. Like, why do I need a watch that does all this stuff, right? They just kind of threw everything in it and let people figure it out. And then a few iterations later, people started to say, oh, this is really good for fitness. Like, it can read my heart rate on my wrist and be accurate. It can stream music to my headphones. I can put it on when I run and it can track my runs. And now most of the feature sets are tailored to fitness. So I think something like that needs to happen for VR. I'm sorry, for AR. But there are some cases like you think of the Pokemon game, or you think of like, I don't know, Zoom filters and small things like that people don't really know are AR. But it's sort of a way to have this technology out and acceptable to the public so that as it slowly progresses, it's not freaking people out.
Got it. Got it. I have a quick announcement. I saw a question from anonymous attendee, which is, I want to just clarify this. I love questions and answers, so please bring your questions. And this is also recorded, so if you want to get access to it, you will get access to it. I'll share how you get access to it as well. One additional quick announcement. This is probably going to be a surprise for Jonathan, but that's all good. I'll quickly share my screen here. We have, I would love for you to share. I would love for you to, I have a gift for you, which is a product management primer. It's going to be completely free. I'll give you access to my course and also a book. What you have to do in return is share that what you're learning from this program. You have to share what you're learning and share maybe a sentence or two. Tag Jonathan. He's taken so much time out for us. He has been generous with his time. So tag him, thank him on that public post. Tag me if you want to. No, you don't have to, but make sure you tag Jonathan and tag Product Manager HQ. And I'll make sure you get this primer, which has all the product management frameworks, my favorite tech product management frameworks, as well as some of the interesting things I've learned over the course of last couple of years from having led the community of thousands of product managers. So that's that. Going back to,
sweet. You guys get on that.
yeah. So please make sure you share. Make sure you share what what you learn from here. Tag Jonathan in it. Tag product manager. Maybe you can tag me. Completely up to you. And then we will take questions anytime. So feel free to bring in questions. I would love to make it interactive. I can also unmute you. So just raise your hand if you want to speak. I'll unmute you. So with that, I'll go to the first question we have is, what would you recommend for someone interested in building a video game console or a headset that works in Android? I know that's a very specific question and we can put it off until later, or yeah, it's up to you, Jonathan.
Building a video game console or headset that works with Android. So if I understand the question properly, you want to build an Android-based video game console. Something that comes to mind are like building kits like Raspberry Pi or something. I remember, is it called Ouya, which was an Android-based system they came out with. I don't know if that's still available, but you can look that up. The headset portion, headset that works with Android. I would think any Bluetooth enabled headset would work with Android.
Got it.
Um,
Got it.
but whoever is the anonymous attendee, let me know if I didn't answer the question proper. I'll try to give more detail on my thoughts there.
Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate that. So moving on to our webinar, I'm curious about what are some of the mental models that has helped you when it comes to working on AR? If you can share some of those thinking processes when it comes to user experience, or even product design or product development. Any mental models that you keep going back to that you recommend?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So first I want to say, like, the difference in something like AR versus an already existing product is I try to think of it more as a startup. And the way I describe it is just you try to move really fast, prove your hypotheses. So with that, like, you ask a lot of questions, like probably not literally asking someone else questions, but in your head, you want to form a bunch of questions that you need to chase and try to get answered in order to move forward, because that's what it's all about. Like, it's largely unknown. So for those things, I try to just be really light on my feet, really try not to put my foot in the ground on any of those topics, because so much is always changing. But from more of a PM perspective, I think what's helped me in AR is to just dig in and always, like, be willing to learn something new. Because there's just so many moving parts, and if the thing that you don't think is important or that will help you, like, you miss out on and forget that every little part has some value. So, well, it's like trying to find balance of doing too much versus focusing on your one little part of a product and missing out on some great learning opportunity.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We do have a question from, thank you for sharing that. I do agree that the light is so critical. We have a question from Tanu, and feel free to ask me to unmute you, Tanu. Happy to unmute you. So the question is that, in my understanding, the technology is very new. Does that make it more challenging for an aspiring product manager lacking the technical background? Do companies encourage business product managers in this industry? Which also ties in with my question, which is, what kind of background, what kind of technical background you need to be able to get in this industry? And yeah, please share that.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I like to think that my background in games and, voice and text comms had something to do with interest and being able to land here. But a lot of the people I work with did not previously work in AR. I think it's actually the opposite. Because it's so new and it's always changing, you may not have such a hard restriction on people that you want to come in. You might want more diverse thought, diverse opinions for people to help build that foundation for the product that you're going on, because you don't have the product yet, versus something in, say, health tech on a product that already exists. You might want somebody that's worked in health before and knows the science and can come in and hit the ground running, right? So when I first started, my first manager basically said to me, when you come in, it'll take about 90 days, 60 to 90 days for you to not feel stupid anymore. That's normal. Just like it's like absolutely everybody feels that way. Just like keep reading, keep meeting people, keep talking and asking questions, and you'll figure it out. And sure enough, that's what happens. You just got to dive in. So I think anyone who has like that PM experience, like wants to be a PM, like is capable, like go for it.
What are some of your favorite ways to learn about this? Is there a course, a book, a thought leader that you recommend?
To
Obviously,
learn
you
about
have.
AR,
What was that?
to learn about AR specifically.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I would say use a lot of the products that are in the market now.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of people in AR who use Twitter to make announcements, share products, start conversations. So social media is good for that in some ways. There's also like various newsletters you can find and sign up for that will give like updates on AR specific news, VR specific news.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and I know we haven't been able to have it much now, but at least pre-pandemic, there are a lot of typical like meetups for PMs and games and VR and AR that I would go to, but not so much lately, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. We do have a couple of questions. So one is, how do you approach more research intensive parts of AR, VR, for example, computer vision, versus some
Mm.
of the other more standard? So how does this AR, VR, that's like, maybe that's a separate question, but this is a question more about how do you approach more research intensive part of AR, VR versus the standard software development work? Is there a specific way that you've found successful for building AR products?
Yeah, that's ongoing. That's a great question. So we do have a very lovely and highly intelligent UXR department that helps with the more research intensive part, but it's about iteration. I mentioned rapid prototyping. So as a team, we do a lot of that and like quickly build out sort of low-key dummy versions of features that can then be pushed to UXR, who then gets it in front of people to actually test and verify use cases and hypotheses that we may have.
Mm. Now, is there, following along on that question, is there anything different you would do as a product manager in this discipline compared to a typical software product manager, like software products product manager? Is there anything
Hmm.
that stands out from your experience that is different?
I would say there are a few things, some that have to do with AR, some just with Google. I will say with Google, the sheer size of the company and resources make it both difficult and easier.
Mm-hmm.
Difficult is, you know, you reach more people, so any small changes actually have an effect on people. So you have to be more careful. Things move slower. You have to get more approvals to do this and that. But also you have resources, like tons of resources. A lot of smart people with tons of experience in AR and VR to help out and answer questions. Um, and specifically with AR, I think that again, I would say the unknown is a big part of that.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, you touched on that earlier. The fact that nobody has figured it out yet is the biggest opportunity. At the same time, also makes
yep,
it a little
exactly.
challenging. Yeah,
Yeah, and
interesting.
kind of indirectly as an industry with, you know, name any big tech company working on AR. I think indirectly we're all like helping each other try to figure it out. Because if one company does one thing, you're like, huh, let's wait and see how that does. Let's follow up with this. So you can see everyone kind of converging on similar things, or learning from other people's mistakes, which is, I think is actually a good thing.
Yeah, yeah. Nothing like
Yeah.
collaborative competition. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
We have another question from Bruce. Bruce is joining us from, I think he's joining us from Singapore. I may be wrong though. So thank you for joining us. I know it's early morning for you. So Bruce, what I have, what he's asking is if you were
If
to,
you're the one who interviews a fresh PM who doesn't have a background in ARVR, what would you ask him or her? What would be the most important thing that you'll consider as an interviewer? Wow. So I could answer this, but let me put it this way. So I do interviews. I can't remember the last time I actually interviewed someone for our org specifically, but the way Google's interviews are structured, it's more of an exercise, and each interviewer is, you can read more about this online, but each interviewer has a group of questions they ask you, and mine are unfortunately not in the behavioral part. And to me, honestly, like, their background doesn't matter, because by the time they're pushed through the recruiters, who usually sort everything, and they get to me, like, they've already been like verified and checked, and I just like might look at their background to get an idea of who they are as a person. But if I'm interviewing you for AR and you have no experience in AR, that doesn't matter to me.
mm,
I would actually personally prefer a more diverse group of people. Some who work in AR, some maybe come from maps or self-driving cars or healthcare, like whatever. I think everyone can be valuable. You never know.
mhm, mhm. How much of your work entails working with, this is deep tech, right? So this is emerging technology. So I'm wondering, are you spending more time on the use case development side versus spending more time on the tech side? And then if you can add a little more color to that question by helping us understand what does that typical day look like for you?
Okay, I'll say both, actually. And there are some typical days, but most days are quite different. How can I describe this? So you're constantly following up on things, right? There may be some days where I have so many meetings, I'm almost unable to follow up on some stuff. And then there are days where they're lighter, and the whole time I'm writing docs, I'm reaching out to people, doing follow-up, maybe been working with UXR on some CUJs and such. So there's a few teams that I specifically work really close with, and sometimes it just goes outside to other people, like in legal or marketing or whatever's needed. So it's really always different, which is part of the job that I really like.
And how do you think that organization and structure are some of the key traits for, just a general PM question? What are some of the key traits that you found has worked for you to succeed in this role? And and what are some of the misconceptions? For instance, I know that one of the big misconceptions in the product community is that you have to be deeply technical and you have to really be able to come from an engineering background. That's a complete misconception. You don't even need a 4-year or college degree in engineering, or even any school, just to be a product manager. But what are some of the, going back to my question, what are the traits that you found works for you, or what you consider important in product? And what are some of the misconceptions, if you are aware of any?
Yeah, I would start with that one, that you need to be an engineer. Like, it's good to have PMs who are engineers, or have built hardware, or have built software. But like I mentioned, I was a video game artist, right? So video games happen to also be technical in development. So I did get that knowledge, thankful for me. But I think if you don't have that engineering background, you have to, at the very least, like, have that humility and that willingness to learn, where you're going to ask somebody and you're going to bring it up if you don't know what somebody is telling you, right? Like, if someone's explaining something really technical, you can't just, yeah, I get it. Like, no, like, what, wait, like, what was that? I don't know what that is. Like, can you explain that to me? Like, because I'm speaking with engineers all the time, and sometimes it's just like, whoa, like, I just need to ask, and that's fine. So you have to be okay with that. I would also say being a good communicator in general. PMs have to speak with people, like, all the time, like, a lot. You cannot avoid that and be a good PM. And you can't, like, take things personally. You have to find a balance with trying to stand by your opinion if you feel it's right, being willing to change if you find that that is wrong, and not being offended when somebody tells you it's wrong. You have to just be open in that way, but still strong when it counts. Like, no, I'm not letting that go by, but it's wrong. Like, oh, okay, well, let me look at this, think about it, and get back to you. And if you still stand by your word, you stand by your word, but you've got to be dynamic in that way. Dynamic communicator. How's that?
That's great. I love it. I love it.
Something, all these things are qualities I'm always working on myself, but I'm also getting better technically. So if you're someone who doesn't have a very heavy technical background, don't be discouraged. Just be willing to learn.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. So with that, we are going to open it up for questions, and we'll be concluding this show if there are no more questions. But yeah, feel free to ask, raise your hand. I'll unmute you. We can have a conversation. While you're thinking of your question, I just wanted to share this one more time. Feel free to share. Feel free to share what you learned from here. Feel free to take a minute to summarize maybe one or two learning lessons. It doesn't have to be a big presentation, but just, one or two lines. Just share what you learn, and in return, I'll make sure you get your primer on product management, around different frameworks, around different technologies, around a little document I've created that gives you all the cheat sheet for, like, all the terms you need to know as a technical PM. You don't need to attend a 4-year college degree, engineering degree, to become a tech PM, but you will also get all the PM frameworks I've created. So feel free to share that. In return, what I'm asking from you is share a simple post on LinkedIn, maybe 1 or 2 sentences, maybe more. It's up to you. Tag Jonathan in it, tag Product Manager HQ in it. If you want, tag me in it, and I'll make sure this resource makes it to your inbox within next 24 to 48 hours. Any questions? We'll be opening up for questions at this time, and I'd love to give you an opportunity to connect with Jonathan and learn from him. If you have any one-on-one questions, I'd love to take that on right now. All right, Jonathan, looks like we don't have any questions. We did have a lot of questions throughout the workshop, so that's great. Thank you so much for making it interactive to the audience. I appreciate all the questions. Thank you for making time for us, Jonathan. This will be the first AR product management interview I've ever done, so I have to say I learned a ton. I'm gonna follow your journey. I'm going to continue to see what you're up to, and hopefully one of these days we'll interview you in a real life event when we have this.
For sure. And also I want to say thank you so much for being patient with me, because I know you've had to chase me down a bit in order to get me to reply. And I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Take care, everyone. Thank you. Have a great evening. Be well.